What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Who are the hottest D-backs hitters and the coldest pitchers as they get ready to face off against the Detroit Tigers this upcoming weekend?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter, at CareerThomas24 for my personal account, at Millard.Thomas123 for my personal account on Instagram, at CareerThomas24 is my personal account on Twitter, or look up Locked on Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we will be talking about the D-backs versus Tigers series. We'll talk about the hottest hitters and the coldest pitchers for this upcoming weekend series against Detroit. So we'll preview all the pitching matchups and tell you who's hot and who's not right now for the Arizona Diamondbacks. But before we get into that, first I want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. Trying to hit 2,000 subs by the All-Star break, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now, let's talk about the D-backs versus Tigers. I first want to start with a general preview of the series before we get into the hottest and coldest hitters / pitchers for the D-backs entering this weekend series against Detroit. So let's first start with a general preview. D-backs versus Tigers. D-backs, of course, currently still below 500 when you're looking at the standings. D-backs 21-23. I wouldn't say they've had the best season so far, as you D-backs fans know. Offense has been frustrating. The rotation's been hurt. The bullpen's been bad. But even with all that being said, the D-backs are currently in a three-way tie for that last wildcard spot in the National League. And they're going against a Detroit Tigers team who has been kind of right where the D-backs are. The Tigers are also 21-22. So both of these teams are looking to get to 500 or above 500 in this series. Both of them, the Tigers are 3 games back of a wild card spot themselves. So both of those teams are also trying to make waves in the wild card race. And both of them are probably looking at this series as another potential momentum builder. The D-backs have looked really good against the bad teams this year. The Reds, the Rockies, the Cardinals. They just beat the Reds twice in the last week. And now they get to face a Detroit Tigers team who is average, mediocre at best. And so it could be a good opportunity for the D-backs to start building momentum and at least get to 500 or better on this season so far. And I think this series against the Detroit Tigers will be kind of parallel to how the D-backs have played this year. I just mentioned how their records are similar, but the play styles of both of these teams are also kind of similar, because both of these teams don't have the best offenses. The D-backs offense was really good to start the year, but if you look at the last 3 weeks, it's been awful. And the Tigers offense all year just hasn't been good. They are currently tied for the 3rd fewest runs in the National League. That Tigers offense, I mean, you just go up and down that lineup. There's not too many guys that are scared of. Riley Green, who was one of their top prospects, he's having a pretty good season. Mark Canha, he's been fine this year. Kerry Carpenter's been fine. But outside of those 3, it's been a lot of nothingness from that Tigers offense. Really upset Spencer Torkelson hasn't taken the next step because he's an ASU guy. Of course, I'm an ASU guy as well. But you look at that Tigers offense, you look at the D-backs offense, Both of them struggling in a rut. So offensively, this could be a series that comes down to one big at bat in the 7th or 8th inning, because I think the pitching matchups are going to be fine in this series. The Tigers are actually one of the best pitching staffs in the American League. They have a 3.5 ERA among just their starting pitchers. And look at the Tigers bullpen, 3.17 ERA for just the Tigers relievers, which I think is top 3 in the American League. So the D-backs don't have a good bullpen themselves. I do think their starting rotation can match up with the Tigers at the very least, especially when everyone is healthy. But as it currently stands, the two teams, I think they're very similar. I think the D-backs have a better offense, with the Tigers having a better pitching staff. But I think overall, they're probably at the same level with how they've played at this point of the season. And looking ahead at those pitching matchups, we got Skubal versus Ryan Nelson, Flaherty versus Zach Gallen, and then Matt Manning versus Jordan Montgomery. Tarik Skubal, lefty, he's having himself a Cy Young candidate season. He's been absolutely phenomenal this year for the Tigers. 2.02 ERA, below a .9 whip, 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. Like, he's been devastating in that Detroit rotation. And we know the D-backs are very good against lefties. That's the only time their offense shows up now, is when there's a lefty starter on the mound. So I would love to see the offense take it to a Cy Young candidate. If the offense can do that, they would probably feel pretty good about themselves. I don't know how long, but at least in the short term, if you can take it to a Skubal who's been absolutely filthy this year, I think you would at least feel good about yourselves as an offense for 24 hours at the very least. And then Ryan Nelson, he goes against Skubal in that start, game 1. Ryan Nelson is not elite, but I do think he's pitched well enough in most of his starts this year to at least keep the D-backs in games. I know he hasn't been great the last 2 starts, but I do think he's battling. I do think he's doing enough. You look at StatCast for Ryan Nelson on his pitches. Still not super effective. The batting average against a lot of his pitches don't look great, but he is mixing up his repertoire a little bit more balanced, not as fastball dependent as he was last year. He's also throwing a little bit harder as well. I do think this is a better Ryan Nelson, and the stats don't exactly bear that out yet, but I do think from the eye test, I like this version of Ryan Nelson a lot more than last year's version of Ryan Nelson. And I think the big question entering game 1 is, will Corbin Carroll play? Because he sat in the last game against a lefty starter, and we know Torey Lovullo loves the platoon splits. With Corbin Carroll struggling all season, it's not hard for Torey Lovullo to just say, you know what? Lefty on lefty, let's just say Corbin Carroll. The issue is Corbin Carroll has been significantly better against lefty starters this year than he has against righty starters. He has 17 hits and like 120 at-bats against righties. He has 14 hits and like 60 at-bats against lefties. Like, he's quite literally has as many hits in half the at-bats against lefties as he does as opposed to righties. So I think Corbin Carroll needs to start in game 1. And if anything, maybe we need to sit him a little bit more against right-handed pitchers going forward, because that's been his biggest struggle this year. Game 2, Jack Flaherty against Zach Gallen. Flaherty having himself a bounce-back season after being pretty mediocre the last 3 years. Best average against his fastball since 2021. Leads the American League in strikeout to walk ratio. Is this a fluke, or is Flaherty back to being legit? I don't know. So far, so good for Flaherty at the beginning of the season for Detroit, but I don't know how long it can last. And going against Zach Gallen, I'm going to feel very good in game 2. The biggest issue that I have with Zach Gallen right now is the length of his starts. You look at Fott, you look at Jordan Montgomery. All of them pitch into the 7th inning. Zach Gallen is the only... Well, I don't know. He's not the only starter for the D-backs, but among the Fotts and the Jordan Montgomerys, Gallen is the only one of those 3 who is yet to record an out in the 7th inning this season. He has not gone as deep as we've wanted him to this year. We know he's an ace. I think part of it, you don't want to overthrow Zach Gallen, because Zach Gallen is not afraid to throw 8 innings every single start. He's not afraid to throw out his arm. So I think it's a little bit of a load management for Zach Gallen, and you hope if the D-backs make the postseason, that's when he will start peaking more in the second half of the season. But as it currently stands, I would like to see Zach Gallen go a little bit deeper in these ball games, knowing the bullpen is pretty shaky for the D-backs. If you look at Jack Flaherty too, in his career against the D-backs, he's allowed a 911 OPS in his career against this entire D-backs lineup. That's just the current players on this D-backs squad. 911 career OPS against all the guys that the D-backs currently have on their roster. So could be a great offensive game in game number 2 for the D-backs. Game number 1 might be tougher. Yes, D-backs are great against the lefties, but Scooball's been a beast. But I think in game number 2 with Gallen on the mound, hopefully that, revitalizes the offense, knowing that they have their ace on the mound. You want to get him some run support. And then in the finale, Matt Manning versus Jordan Montgomery. Manning is good, but he's not someone that's going to overpower you or strike out people at a very high rate. He's a very good pitcher, and you have to watch out for him. Jordan Montgomery is someone that wasn't elite his last outing, but did enough to get the job done for the D-backs. He's done a great job with length all season, pitching into the 7th multiple times this year. His one bad start was against the Dodgers. I think he's been better than a 4.76 ERA that he's currently displaying. So when I'm looking at this series, D-backs versus Tigers, I like the D-backs having Gallen and Monty both in a series, both going in the same series. I think that bodes well for the D-backs' chances to win. And for both of these teams, the offense kind of struggles. So I really do think this whole series is going to bottom down to potentially 1 or 2 plays where we're going to need the D-backs to come through with a big knock in like the 7th or 8th inning. And we've seen more times than not the D-backs probably not get that knock this season, but going against a Detroit team who they don't see often, I'm hoping the D-backs can clutch it out against one of the more mediocre teams in the American League. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouse.com free-to-trade master program. Every trade master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss the hottest and coldest hitters for the D-backs over the last couple of weeks. And let's first start by looking at some of the hottest hitters. So this is over their last 15 days, so like the last 11 or 12 games for the D-backs. These are currently their hottest hitters. In his last 11 games, he is 14 for 33. This is Kevin Newman. That's a 424 average, 1093 OPS, multiple multi-hit games. Kevin Newman has been the dude right now at shortstop with his ability to play defense better than Blaze Alexander. And the fact that he is swinging the bat really well right now. It looks like it's Kevin Newman's job for the, short term at the very least until Geraldo Perdomo comes back. It feels like the D-backs are going to lean on Kevin Newman more at the shortstop position than a Blaze Alexander. I wish it was more Blaze, but since he's been, yanked in and out the lineup, his defensive struggles starting to affect his offense. He has not been effective recently. Meanwhile, Kevin Newman has played like an absolute superstar over his last 11 games. 5 doubles as well, a triple, like the extra base hits. He's not striking out. He's doing absolutely everything for the D-backs over the last 2 weeks, and that's a big reason why he's getting all these reps at shortstop, and I think it's going to continue being that way until Blaze Alexander picks his bat back up, and that glove starts to flash some more leather. And speaking of Blaze Alexander, why not talk about him as one of the coldest hitters on this D-backs team? Because over his last 15 days, which is 8 games, he actually has the worst average on the team over the last 2 weeks. He is 2 for his last 23, which is an 87 average. He's got 9 strikeouts to just 1 walk. I think, like we just mentioned, all the defensive struggles has played into his psyche. I think it's affecting his offense. And right now, Blaze might just need to sit on the bench for a day or two and just reset himself. I just don't like the way he looks right now. He doesn't have that same confidence that he had at the beginning of the season, and we need a confident Blaze Alexander to be at his very best. So hopefully he can get better as the season starts moving forward. Jock Peterson, over his last 11 games, he has a .916 OPS. He has 3 home runs with 3 doubles the last 2 weeks. The power has started to finally turn around for a Jock Peterson. He's starting to display that. The D-backs are looking for some more gap power, some more over the fence power. They do not have enough sluggers slugging right now in this lineup. And Jock Peterson, big bat, signed to be a big bat in this offseason, and he's starting to turn that power on right now over the last couple weeks. Someone that also has turned the power on a little bit over the last couple weeks, in his last 11 games, Jake McCarthy, .907 OPS and a .500 slugging with a .407 OBP. He's looked pretty good this season. 5 walks to 4 strikeouts over those last 11 games with 2 doubles as well and a home run. Jake McCarthy has been pretty good for the D-backs this season, with Alek Thomas going down the first 5 games of the year. Alek Thomas went down pretty early. Jake McCarthy has stepped up, especially with the way, the craziest thing is, with the way Corbin Carroll and Lourdes Gurriel have played basically all season. Is Jake McCarthy the best D-backs outfielder right now? I think the answer is probably yes. He swings the best bat. We know he has the speed as a weapon too. Jake McCarthy quietly might be the best D-backs outfielder right now, and that is absolutely crazy to say, but unfortunately, it might be the truth. And then when looking at some dudes who have not been as hot recently, obviously the big 3, Eugenio, Corbin Carroll, and Lourdes Gurriel, all of them in their last 11, 12 games, not good. Eugenio, 186 average. He's 8 for his last 43. Corbin Carroll, 182 average. He's 8 for his last 44. And then Lourdes Gurriel, 186 average. He's 8 for his last 43. And during that time, Gurriel, 13 strikeouts to just 3 walks. Carroll, 9 strikeouts to 3 walks. And Eugenio Suarez, 11 strikeouts to 4 walks. And all 3 of them only have 2 home runs combined in their last 11 to 12 games. Just not good enough from that big 3. And more importantly, they have a new guy that has joined them over the last 12 weeks. Christian Walker, also in a little bit of a slump as well. He only has 1 home run in his last 12 games. He has 11 strikeouts in his last 12 games. He's 10 for his last 43, which is a .233 average. And most importantly, his OPS, 669 in the last 12 games, just not good enough. He has not been displaying that power recently, and he has not been getting on base enough recently as well. And one other fun thing that I want to look at, runners in scoring position over the last 2 weeks, because I just mentioned those were their stats just overall, non-situation or whatever. Those are just their stats overall the last 2 weeks. If you look at their stats over the last 2 weeks, when it's runners in scoring position, the list kind of flips upside down. The worst hitter over the last 2 weeks with runners in scoring position, Ketel Marte. He is 3 for his last 14, which is a .214 average. Kevin Newman, he is 2 for his last 9, which is a .222 average. But you know who the best D-backs hitters over the last 14 days are with the runners in scoring position? Corbin Carroll. He is 5 for his last 13, which is a .385 average. Lourdes Gurriel, 3 for the last 10. Eugenio Suarez, 3 for his last 11. Those are the top 3 hitters with the runners in scoring position the last 2 weeks. So that's why this D-backs offense is so weird, and that's why it feels like you can never get like a sequence of good stuff happening all at once. It doesn't feel like the D-backs string together the run of hits. It doesn't feel like they put together the big innings because the best guys only hit when there's no one on base. And then the worst players on this D-backs team only get a hit when there is someone on base, but they usually don't get a hit in any other situation. So this D-backs team just is not consistent enough when you look at the offense. Guys like Eugenio, Corbin Carroll, Lourdes Gurriel, and Christian Walker all need to pick it up in this series against Detroit. And then the Kevin Newmans, the Jock Petersons, the Jakes McCarthy's of the world all need to keep it going because those guys are keeping the offense afloat right now. And of course, Ketel Marte, he's been a superstar all season, so he's never hot or cold. He is just in that Marte zone every single day. Now we'll talk about the hottest and coldest pitchers for the D-backs as they enter the next series against the Detroit Tigers. Hey, but if you think the D-backs are going to win this series against the Tigers, then why not put a little money down every single game on the D-backs money line? Because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Whenever I see the D-backs are playing, I take Corbin Carroll under on total bases now. I take Marte over on RBIs, and I take the D-backs to win. That doesn't always hit, but when it does, I love seeing money hit my pocket. And if you want to see money hit your pocket, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about the hottest and coldest D-backs pitchers as we enter this next series against the Detroit Tigers. And this will mostly, I guess, be talking about relievers, because we already talked about a lot of the starting pitchers in segment number 1. So it will be a little bit more reliever happy. One guy who has been absolutely hot, who we have a pretty shaky relationship with, is Joe Multiply, who has been Joe minus the last few weeks because in his last 4.2 innings pitched, no earned runs for Joe Multiply. He's been incredible. A 143 average, a .64 whip. He's done everything over his last 5 games, only 1 walk to 4 strikeouts. Really incredible stuff from Joe, who has been shaky at times. At times, I do not trust him, and he does get a lot of high leverage moments, but recently, he's been good, so no complaints from me. Justin Martinez, he has also been on fire all season long. Over his last 6.2 innings pitched, no earned runs, 3 walks to 11 strikeouts. You'll definitely take that. The whip, still not the best, 135, because he did give up 6 hits and 3 walks during his last 6.2 innings pitch. But because his stuff is so nasty and he can easily strike out anybody at any time, he doesn't give up a lot of earned runs because of it. And Justin Martinez is someone that potentially should swap roles with Kevin Ginkel moving forward. If we see another couple of bad outings from Ginkel, it should probably be Justin Martinez taking over that role moving forward. Then if you want to talk about some guys who have not been so good recently for the Arizona Diamondbacks, as we mentioned, Kevin Ginkel, over his last 4.1 innings pitched, 7 hits, 4 earned runs. His whip is 2.08. His batting average allowed, 368, just not good enough. He is someone that we were heavily relying on entering 2024 as maybe the D-backs' best reliever last season. Just hasn't been the same this year, and I don't know why. A little bit more shaky. Maybe it's just early season struggles. But whatever the case is, D-backs need 2023 Kevin Ginkel if this bullpen has any shot of being relevant this year. Logan Allen, I've been calling for his job recently. Over his last 4.1 innings pitched, 11 hits, 4 earned runs, a 2.54 whip, a 4.58 average allowed. I loved Logan Allen when he first got called up. I remember his debut. He did a great job battling as a long reliever. I think he came in for Ryan Nelson when he left to start early. And he's had a couple good outings since then. But recently, just hasn't been good enough. Really been hurting this Diamondbacks team, especially with inherited runners. It feels like they always score when Logan Allen has to come in and pitch. And if you can't have a reliever come in when there's a jam and expect that guy to get out of the inning, then that guy probably shouldn't be in your bullpen. And that's how I feel about Logan Allen. Then the final guy that I want to discuss who hasn't been as good recently, but I do like a lot, is a Bryce Jarvis. I still like him as a long reliever, but as this D-backs rotation gets more healthy, it should probably be Slade Cecconi. Even though he struggled recently, I think I like Slade a little bit more in my bullpen as a long reliever than Bryce Jarvis. But regardless, I view both of those guys as the same tier and level of pitcher. Bryce Jarvis in his last 4.1 innings pitched, 3 earned runs for a 6.23 ERA, 2.08 WHIP, and a 286 average allowed. He just hasn't been good enough recently as well. He's been shaky the whole season, and the D-backs just need more quality, high leverage relievers. They might have an arm or two in the minors that could help them out, but the D-backs probably have to scour the waiver wire, scour the trade market, because I think this D-backs bullpen needs an upgrade, and you need at least one more guy that you can trust. And I'm hoping Mike Hazen can make at least one more move for this bullpen to upgrade it, because as it currently stands, this D-backs bullpen is just not good enough if you have the hopes of making the postseason. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.